Yep.
Okay. Is the transcription working for people who need transcription? I see transcription on the side of my screen, so I'm hoping that this is the case for everybody in the meeting as well. If you need transcription or having a difficult time accessing, please put this in the chat and we will,
Okay.
Angela might try to troubleshoot to help you.
I can tell you right now that if you can't see the transcription, go up to the little three dots that says more, go to record and transcribe and show transcript, and it'll pop up.
Thanks. Okay.
And it'll be on the side.
Okay. Thank you. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So just a little bit of housekeeping first. So we've just talked about the Q&A and the chat. You are welcome to put questions and comments in the chats. Even though I'm going to be giving a lot of information, I would like this to be interactive, and I would like you to be able to bounce ideas off each other in the chat while we go along. With that said, please no identifying information in the chat about your child, about your child's school, or about staff members. We really want to keep privacy at the forefront here. You're welcome to ask general questions. And just as a quick intro, Angela Bossy is here. She's an occupational therapist in Bellevue School District, and she's going to be the chat monitor and chat helper. My name is Michelle, and I'm a special education coach in Bellevue School District. I've been an educator for about 20 years, primarily with students with some sort of emotional, behavioral, or social difficulty. I hold a level 1 certification from the PDA Society of North America. I'm also a certified collaborative and proactive solutions provider. I underwent a very long training with many months with Dr. Ross Green, and I'm certified to implement and train others in using that model, which is a great model to use with kids who have PDA. With that said, I'm also a parent. I have 2 kids with disabilities, one of whom graduated from Bellevue's transition program, and the other is still a student in Bellevue School District who has an IEP. When I talk about my kids, by the way, I'm going to try to use gender neutral pronouns just to protect their privacy. Because again, I think privacy, we all need to be aware that our kids deserve that level of privacy. But with that said, both of my kids have disabilities that manifest in challenging behavior. One of my kids has a classic PDA profile. I first learned about PDA a few years ago, and I would say that I came across PDA while I was in a state of probably complete desperation. I'll tell you, there is a moment, and you probably, if you're here, you've had moments like this in your life too. A very small moment with a really big impact. And that moment was, I was driving in my car and my child was in the back seat and another child was in the back seat. And I dropped something, and I don't even remember what it was, but I dropped something in the back seat. And without thinking, I said, "Oh, could you pick that up, honey?" And immediately after I said it, I had this feeling of like, oh, I just shot myself in the foot. I can't believe I asked my kid to pick that up. What am I going to do when they don't pick it up? And I started strategizing and planning for the opposition. And am I going to let it go, or am I going to hold the line? And as I was going through that thought process, I didn't get very far because the other kid just picked up the thing and handed it to me and said, "Here you go." And that's like, I know from the outside, a really small moment. But it was really profound for me. It was like a lightning bolt moment because I saw really clearly how different things were in my family and with my kid and in my relationship. Because there was not a world in which I could ask my kid to pick something up off the floor and they would just do it. What happened in that realization was incredibly emotional for me. It was like it was like a wave of overwhelming, like wave of grief almost. The question of why is this so hard for my child, blaring in my head over and over, because I knew my child had this really good and kind heart and all of these strengths. And I knew my child wanted to do well. And why was my child incapable of this? And by the way, my child was about 12 years old when this happened, right? And I had 20 years of educational experience and master's level education around kids with disabilities. And we knew that my child had autism and we knew that my child had ADHD, but some of these behaviors were not being explained by the diagnoses. And a lot of the interventions that I was using that I knew so much about were just not working. And that moment just, it was really profound for me. And it was probably that night. I'm guessing it was a 2 a.m. moment, when I was up worrying and thinking about it and perseverating on it. And I started Googling, and maybe I just Googled the right search terms. I don't know. But one of my coping strategies when I'm having difficulty is to gather, my husband's on this call, he'll tell you, is to gather information and make a plan, right? So I'm Googling like, no, there's more to this. There's stuff I don't know here. And that's where I came across the PDA Society website. And this was like 3 years ago. I'm not sure there was a PDA North America at that point. So I was looking at information from the United Kingdom, where much of the research on PDA came out. And I realized that the PDA profile fit my kid to a T. So I started to think about my kid, and then I started to think about all the other kids that I've been working with for the last 20 years. I used to work, like the very beginning of my teaching career, I worked at a special school for kids with emotional difficulties, um, who had all of these interventions at their regular school and they didn't work and they were getting worse. So they sent them to my school where we did just more of the same interventions and we weren't getting good outcomes. Doing more of the same wasn't working. And there were a lot of kids that it started to click, these little snippets of, if this can explain things, and how we can reframe things for those kids could be very powerful for these learners. So I've been learning as much as I can about it ever since. I feel really passionately about the need for families and schools and service providers to learn as much as they can. Framing around PDA has really helped me understand my child. It's helped me move from trying to figure out how to get them to comply and stop being oppositional to accepting who they are and accommodating them. So I'm here to learn. We're all here to learn. The fact that you're here says a lot about you as well. You're here to learn, and we're going to learn from each other. We have a lot to learn. I'm going to tell you a lot, but you have a lot of wisdom too. So please share your wisdom with others, and we can go on this journey together. So I have a really packed agenda. I doubt we're going to get through it, but I was ambitious. So we'll see how far we go. And if we don't go far, we'll do like a part 2. That's okay. But we're going to just talk about what demand avoidance is in general, how PDA is different. We're going to talk about our experience as caregivers, and then we're going to talk about some strategies if we get that far. Okay, so what do we even mean by demands when we say demand avoidance? I like this cartoon. A day can really slip by when you're deliberately avoiding what you're supposed to do. What I like about this cartoon are these 2 words, deliberately, and then this phrase, supposed to. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, but we'll come back to this. We'll refer to it later. So if we're going to talk about demand avoidance, we should talk about demands. What do we mean by demands? Like Calvin in that comic strip, are they just the things we're supposed to be doing? It turns out there are so many demands in life that we don't even realize or think about, right? So the first one, the one that we think about most of all when we think about demands, is direct requests or questions from others. Put your shoes on, put your laundry away, make your bed, sit here and wait. Even politely phrased ones. Would you like a drink? Those are all demands. We also have indirect demands. this is where it gets a little more nuanced. Praise can be an indirect demand. And this can be an indirect demand because if you're praised for doing something really well, like, oh, you cleaned your room so well, your kid might internalize that as a future expectation to keep their room clean and always clean it really well. PDA'ers sometimes don't like praise, and this is a reason why. Time can be a demand. I've got 5 minutes to get this done. Other people's energy can be a demand. You know, either our energy or our vibe or our words, how fast we speak, that can be a demand. Uncertainty can be an indirect demand. We're not quite sure what's going to happen, and we got to make a choice here and figure out what to do. That's a demand in and of itself as well. Things we want to do are demands. Hobbies, seeing friends. Do you ever make plans and it's going to be really fun and then like you're feeling a little tired right beforehand, and even though it was really exciting to think about 2 days ago, you're kind of tired now. You might still want to do it, but it can still feel like a demand. Um, so many demands. Oh, we've got demands within demands. This happens a lot for our kids at school. Because in school you've got cooperative groups, and if a student needs to learn in a cooperative group, they're not just completing the academic exercise, they have to stay seated, they got to sit next to the kid that's annoying them, that's a demand. They have to respond when they're spoken to, they have to know when to speak up. There's a lot of demands within a big demand that if we really unpack, we'll see many, many, many demands embedded in our daily lives. We also have demands we place on ourselves. These are the like I should feelings, like eating, learning, sleeping, showering, preparing food, the things you feel like you want to do for daily living. And then we also have internal demands. That's things that come from inside of us, like being thirsty, being hungry, sensory regulation needs, using the bathroom, thoughts, wishes, a lot. So, I think it's helpful and useful to just have paused and appreciate the amount of demands in daily life that people, I'm a neurotypical person. I don't have lived experience with this. So I don't experience the world perceiving these demands as an anxiety producing thing, but not everybody feels that way. And it can be easy for me to forget that this Mark, yes, all of this stuff's going to be available later. It can be easy for me to forget how many demands there are embedded in our day. So PDA, what is PDA? So PDA was this, the term pathological demand avoidance was first coined by Elizabeth Newson in 2003 after she did a study and some research studying, she was studying kids with autism, and she noticed there was a group of kids with a very similar profile, and she did a deep dive into those kids and produced a paper and coined this term. That term, pathological demand avoidance, has a little hot button word in there, that pathological. Is a pretty triggering word for some folks. And a lot of PDA'ers prefer to use the term pervasive drive for autonomy. I just prefer to use PDA because it's shorter. But if you think of it as an acronym, it could stand for either of those things. It's widely understood to be a profile on the autism spectrum. PDA is not a diagnosis. It is not in the DSM. And the research on PDA is emerging and it's ongoing, and we're learning new things all the time. I just heard that King's College in London is publishing something very soon. The PDA Society of North America just did a giant survey, and they're going to be studying their results soon. But we're finding more and more as time goes on. Another thing that's really important to note is that when we hear demand avoidance, I think that this also happens with social media. I'm not on TikTok or Instagram, but the folks at the PDA Society, I was just at a symposium. Ross Green and Lives in the Balance, that collaborative and practice solutions model I mentioned, they do an annual summit every year. And they just did it in April. And the topic of this year was PDA. And there were a lot of really awesome speakers there. But one of the themes that was coming out of that is don't rely too much on social media. Because I think there's a trend right now, and I wouldn't know because, like I said, I'm not on TikTok, but I think there's a trend that people hear demand avoidance and they say, oh, that's me, um, without quite understanding the profile itself. We see extreme demand avoidance in a lot of scenarios. It's very common in burnout, autistic burnout, like anxiety burnout. It's common in other diagnoses. It's common extreme demand avoidance shows up for a variety of reasons, but the PDA profile is not always the explanation for that. And as we go through and talk about the PDA profile, if you realize like, oh, maybe that's not my kid, that's okay. You're still our people. You're in the right place, because we're going to talk a lot about caregiving experience. We're going to talk a lot about strategies. So whether, are they, aren't they, is it not, is not as important as understanding the experience itself. So I'm going to show you a description of PDA that was provided by Shoshana Friedman. She's an advocate. She's a PDA adult and a parent to a PDA child. And she had this beautiful, in an article, little paragraph about PDA that I just put into sections here. PDA'ers have a highly reactive autonomic threat response with certain triggers. So that autonomic nervous system, that's your amygdala brain, that's your lizard brain, right? So that means that when you have a trigger, that amygdala, that fight or flight, gets activated with very low threshold, right? It's kind of on alert all the time. So she explains this: while everyone gets triggered or activated sometimes, PDA's nervous system sense danger when faced with a lack of autonomy, control, social equality or status, or a loss of co-regulation source in daily life. Okay, that's a lot to kind of take in. And there's two different themes there, right? So there's nervous system being activated when sensing a lack of autonomy and control. And there's also nervous system being activated when you're losing your co-regulator. So if co-regulation is a new term for you, that's simply everybody has a need for co-regulation, and some people more than others. Co-regulation is relational regulation. So if I'm upset, having a calm presence by me will help me calm down. Caregivers are often the primary co-regulators for our children, right? So if a child loses that relational co-regulation, they can move into fight or flight. The threat response is disabling. Okay, good to know, good to keep in mind. Which means that unless we receive accommodations, the threat response limits our ability to function and thrive. Okay. The PDA may express the threat response in the moment. Okay, that can come out in some kind of meltdown. It can hold, the PDA may hold the threat response inside of them until it's safe to let it out, otherwise known as masking. They may accumulate a feeling of threat inside their bodies for years, unaware of why they are struggling. Key features of a PDA profile. So we've got resisting and avoiding the ordinary demands of life. We have using social strategies as part of the avoidance. This used to be a lot more emphasized in identifying a PDA profile than I think it is now, because I think we're starting to understand more what social strategies may look like. So what that means, using social strategies as part of the avoidance, that could be anything from like manipulating a social situation to remain in control, like a more sophisticated way. It doesn't have to be very sophisticated. It could be refusal, just saying, nope, you can't make me. It could be making excuses. The classic excuse is my legs don't work, or my arms aren't strong enough. It could be distraction. I'm going to tell you a joke, arguing, negotiating, delaying. I'll get to it. I'm on it. I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. Proposing other options, using make-believe. Another social thing my kid likes to do is kind of doing the task, but doing it halfway or in a way that sabotages in order to equalize control. PDA'ers are really into equalizing control. So yeah, we may get my kid to empty the dishwasher, but they might put the bowls where the plates go, but the fork's in upside down, bang stuff around while they're doing it. That's a social strategy. That's a social strategy around avoidance. PDA'ers may appear socially able, but that might mask underlying differences and difficulties. They often have intense emotional mood swings. They are often very comfortable in role play and pretense and fantasy, and sometimes that's to an extreme extent. I found with my kid is older now, but I've seen that kind of evolve over time from being 3, 4, 5, and full on role play of favorite characters to while that role play aspect isn't there, my PDA still likes to immerse themselves in it's mostly gaming, but fantasy worlds. An intense focus, often on other people, real or fictional. So this could be characters as well. And then, of course, a need for control. This last one down here in bold, you guys already know this one. Conventional approaches in support parenting or teaching are often ineffective. Okay. So some other unique aspects around PDA. Many demands are avoided simply because they're demands. It doesn't have to do with their opinion about the demand. It's the demand itself that's triggering that nervous system response. There can be what we might think a perceived irrational quality to the avoidance. Like one that happens at my house is frequently my child might be getting ready to do something. And then if we tell them to do it, they'll respond with, I was about to do that, but now I can't because you told me to. You know, that might look irrational to us, but if you understand PDA and what's happening in their nervous system, it actually makes sense. Also, the avoidance can vary. It depends on a lot of variables, just like our capacity and our patience, you know, can go up and down based on many variables. The same is true for our kids. How are demands avoided? You might have seen this before. This is this little triangle of escalation. The PDA Society, I believe, created this. I'm not exactly sure, so I can't credit it. I don't remember where I picked it up. But down at the bottom, you've got calm and able. And then as the child's tolerance kind of lessens, you go up this ladder from to distraction, excuses, procrastination, into what can look like physical incapacitation, withdrawal into fantasy, reducing meaningful conversation. We have a lot of grunts at our house, a lot of grunts. Taking control, complete compliance. So sometimes it can go the opposite. You know, when that fight, flight, or freeze response can also turn into a fawn response, where they might be a complete compliance with later breakdown. And then at the very top, we have what I call a meltdown. But that's they're upset, they're agitated. You see self-harm. Sometimes that meltdown is very internalized. It looks like shutting down. Sometimes it's aggression. Sometimes it's running away. If you see on this red line here, under fight, flight, and freeze is panic. It's really important to understand PDA meltdowns as panic attacks. I mean, that's what they are. And framing them that way, it's helpful for me to remember that. It helps me in my empathetic response when my kid is in the middle of it, for sure. I had mentioned that sometimes people attribute demand avoidance to PDA, and that might not always be the case. One thing about PDA to keep in mind is that PDA is lifelong. You don't develop PDA at age 13. If you have PDA, you've had it, and you will continue to have it. It does not go away. We're not going to be able to teach our kids to feel okay with demands. We're not going to be able to teach them to be compliant. Demands are always going to feel threatening to their nervous systems. Always. That's why a lot of people prefer to characterize PDA as a nervous system disability. I like to hear from, and we're going to hear from somebody with lived experience in a second, but their own description of their experiences is that their nervous system's on high alert at all times. You know, they're always scanning for threats in their environment. Their nervous system is activated by what many of us might perceive as really small triggers. And that's not going to end. Okay, so identifying a PDA profile can be difficult. You know, I told you I learned about it. I was self-educated about PDA when my child was 12, and now we found providers who get PDA and understand PDA. But before that, we had quite a journey. Oftentimes, PDA is missed completely, and that's because, so if you think about PDA as a profile on the autism spectrum, PDA'ers tend to be more social than other people with autism. And so because the underlying autism might be less apparent, PDA'ers are good at masking. It could be completely missed. It's often misunderstood. Our society, and this includes our schools, they have a pervasive, largely unconscious belief that if kids really want to, they'll do well, right? Not that kids will do well if they can, but if they really want to. They're choosing this behavior. And our focus is usually on behavior, and it's usually not on the underlying causes, right? There's also a really strongly held belief that like other factors like trauma and poor parenting are the cause of these behaviors. It's very often misdiagnosed. There's a lot of overlaps between PDA presentations and other diagnoses. And there's also a lot of like comorbid stuff. Like my kid has more than just autism, right? That's impacting my child. But PDA itself is often misdiagnosed. My child's very first diagnosis at 5 years old was oppositional defiance disorder, you know, and which I think is a pretty lazy diagnosis in general. But even when they received that diagnosis, I knew it was not correct, right? So we see conduct disorder, reactive attachment disorder, personality disorder, developmental trauma. Often those misdiagnoses can do more harm than good because a lot of them carry a lot of stigma, and a lot of the interventions for those diagnoses do not work for our kids. So,
Michelle,
yes.
we have a couple questions.
Okay,
Are you
cool.
ready?
Yes.
Okay. Does exposure therapy help reduce responses or help a pediator handle triggers or the response when triggered?
That is a really good question. I don't feel qualified to answer that. I'm going to talk about strategies later, and some themes around those strategies will include if something's not working, try something different. Yeah, that's not a great answer, but it's a great question. Okay, what else do we have?
Okay. My 4-year-old son likes to do something when he asks him don't. He also likes praises. Doctor said he looks like PDA. I'm trying to find the connection between him and PDA.
Yeah. Our child also likes to do something when we tell him not to. Yeah, I get that. And our child also likes being praised. And that's something one of the little characteristics on PDAs, like they say a lot of PDAers don't like praise. You know, my kid does. And actually that kind of fits this slide, that one size does not fit all, right? Have you guys have heard the phrase, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, right? There are individual overlapping challenges within people, within environments. Not everybody's going to present the same way. or present the same way over time. In a PDA profile, you hear a lot about characterizing a PDA profile as either being externalizing, where the demand avoidance strategies are more like explosive behavior, or internalizing, where it's more like shutdown. In a single day, a PDA'er could go through either of those. Um, yeah. So trying to find the connection between your child and is my child PDA, is my child not PDA? I think you're in the right place. Let's keep talking. I think the important thing is for you to understand your child as your child. I think it's less important, in my own opinion, is to understand exactly whether my child does or does not exactly fit this profile.
Okay, one more.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say that PDA is parenting related or not parenting related? I would
Oh,
imagine
parenting.
they,
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, we'll talk about that. PDA
um,
is absolutely not caused by your parenting.
will it make it come out worse by parenting or not?
There are things that we are going to talk about, strategies to accommodate um, our child's disabilities. That's going to be the whole, I think, next hour. We're going to focus on the big picture of that question. Okay. Anything else?
Nothing else in the chat. When more questions come, I'll turn my camera back on.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Angela. Okay, so this is a lot. I've got a video here, and it's kind of, it's almost 8 minutes, and it's really, I kind of was like, God, do I want to play this really long video? I think it's really powerful. Christy Forbes is an adult and an advocate who has PDA. And she spent some time talking about how PDA and emotional dysregulation feels for her. She's got a beautiful British accent. It's a long video, but it's worth watching. So I hope the sound works. Let's give it a go. Let's try. Can you guys hear it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I think she said it better than I ever could. Um, any, I learn something every time I watch that video, and I watch that video a lot. Um, Hopefully you learned something from that as well. Feel free to share if you had any thoughts or points that have come out for you. Um, Now, we just talked a lot about the disabling negative aspects of PDA, and I think it can be sometimes I'm guilty of this too because I really want to help my child and I forget the huge number of strengths and positive qualities that come along with a PDA'er. I mean, my kid is pretty awesome. My kid is creative and loves to write and loves to game and make videos and has this great sense of humor and is wonderful. These are just some things I pulled together off. I don't remember where I got this actually, but let's see where I got this. Oh, from a Facebook group. Here's PDA adults describing themselves as determined, creative, imaginative, honest, independent, justice oriented. Um, and parents describing their kids funny, creative, intelligent, determined, charming, caring, loving, bright, unique, talented, independent, passionate. A lot of we'll talk about this a little bit later. A lot of the strategies that we can use with our kids, we really need to remember to use these strength-based strategies and capitalize on their strengths. Yeah, I'm just gonna get the chat. Yeah,
Okay.
PDA is definitely not a choice. And I also appreciate this from the adult's perspective because, you know, we're not hearing, there are some things out there from kids that people have put on the internet and they've almost, I worry about the exploitive nature potentially of that. So I did intentionally choose to just use an adult. Um, and this adult was once a child. So I and has that view backwards and the wisdom to talk about it with the wisdom of an adult. So I appreciated her video too. I'm glad that you guys appreciated it as well. So we talked a lot about PDA and the PDA experience. I want to spend some time now talking about us, um, the caregivers, and our experience with PDA. And it's really, really, really important that we make time and space to talk about our experience because you guys know this isn't easy, right? It's not easy. Um, I did a little when I was preparing this presentation, I did like this Google search, like parenting memes, and this is the stuff that came up, you guys. Like the emotional layer and stigma of a disability that results in challenging behavior is huge, right? I mean, look at these memes. Hints of bad parenting. Your child gets angry very quickly, right? If the child behaves rudely, it is learned from parents, right? Or others living with them. The way children behave is a reflection of their respect for their parents. Your child's behavior is a reflection of yours. Like, this is not just on the internet. Like this is pervasive. It is embedded, right? It is ingrained. It is unconscious, you know, and more often than not, it is completely unchallenged and completely unexamined. And we are all caring for our kids in this context, in this world where this belief system is like the air we breathe. And we have to work hard to counteract that. It's starting to change. People are getting more educated, but we have to be part of that change. And we have to support each other through that. And we have to advocate for our kids through that. And it's hard work. Um, so I talked about Ross Greene a couple times. He wrote, I don't know if you guys, can you guys see me? I can't even tell. So he wrote this book, which I love, called The Explosive Child. He developed collaborative and proactive solutions, which is a model for solving problems with kids collaboratively that doesn't focus on behaviors. Um, And he's got an organization, by the way, called Lives in the Balance, that if you Google, there's tons of resources there. I think Angela might have put a link to it in the chat. Anyway, so he says that there are 5 major pathways that, if lacking, frequently result in challenging behavior. So these are the pathways: executive function skills, language skills, emotional regulation skills, social skills, and cognitive flexibility skills. Okay. Now, think about this list of what causes behavioral challenges. Now, let's think about what's missing from that list, right? All of those skills that he said require sensory and nervous system regulation. So what's missing from that list of what's causing nervous system disabilities, leading to behavioral challenges? Permissive parenting, inconsistent parenting, gentle parenting, helicopter parenting, traditional parenting, strict parenting, wishy-washy parenting, non-traditional parenting. There is no evidence anywhere in any research that any parenting style, short of abuse and neglect, I mean, trauma is real, right, causes learning disabilities or nervous system disabilities. There is no evidence anywhere. And yet, we hear from our friends, from our neighbors, from our teachers, from our community, from TV, from the internet, I would never let my child behave like that. Comments like that all the time. We know that's not true. We need to remind ourselves that's not true. Oh, this is a hard slide to read. The upper right here, this is the guy with a GPS, and he's saying, this map is not correct. And the GPS is saying, it's you that's not correct, right? So this is what I experience a lot as a parent. And if you're here, you probably have experienced this too, where you're saying, this set boundaries, rewards and consequences, all of these things that we're trying when they're not working, we're just being told we're not doing it well enough, or we're not doing it consistently enough, right? And, we're going to talk more about this, but we're just using the wrong map, guys. That's all. That's it. This little bar graph down here, a couple of researchers in the UK in 2023 did a survey of over 1,000 parents of PDA'ers and asked, have you ever felt blamed for your child's presentation or lack of progress? The blue are people who said yes. That's like 90%. Said, yes, I have felt blamed. I think it's really, really, really cool that there's that big red slice. That's a lot bigger than I would have expected. And I think that's promising. But that blue man, that's too big, right? We have to take that out of our own mindsets, and we have to help others take it out of their mindsets as well. So here's what recent caregiver experience says. In January of 2025, there were 2 researchers who published some research that out of Australia. And again, like PDA in the US is more of a newer concept, so we're not seeing as much here, but we are seeing research in other places. The first thing that they found is there's a lack of shared understanding of PDA. So we've got limited recognition. There's a lot of people who say PDA is not real. There's limited understanding and support. Parents overwhelmingly feel like they're receiving judgment and blame. And there's need for self-education. And there's also a forced advocacy burden on caregivers. I've been messaging that as well. Like, it's our job to educate people. That's kind of exhausting, and it is a burden, and it is forced on us because the world doesn't know about this yet. The second theme is that they found is the really powerful impact of PDA. PDA puts a lot of demands on your relationship dynamic with your child. PDA leads to a lot of isolation in families. If you were like me, I hope you haven't experienced a lot of isolation, but in the past, I've experienced quite a bit because of the impact of PDA. Another impact of PDA is difficulty attending to competing family needs. It's like you have siblings or a spouse. It can be really, really difficult to attend to everybody. Also, grieving. I think I mentioned that at the very beginning. I had this real moment of grief around my own expectations of like normalcy. And grieving is a big part of this. The other thing that they found was there's a really strong emotional toll. So they found caregiver capacity is at the level of exhaustion. Caregivers are empathizing and worrying for their PDA child, right? If you are like me, there's a lot of what will the future look like? What about friends? What about this? What about that? And there's a lot of caregiver doubt and self-blame. And then we also, as caregivers, experience a lot of resentment, resentment for PDA and resentment for the circumstances this put us in. So I had mentioned that Lives in the Balance from Ross Green had that symposium that was PDA focused last month. And one of the speakers, her name is Destiny Huff, Dr. Destiny Huff. Dr. Huff is an advocate and she's a parent of PDA'ers. She's an educational advocate. And she brought this concept. She did this really great um, talk on parental shame and the harm of shaming. And she presented this graphic, and it's what she calls the invisible load. And I know some of you can't see this slide, so I'm going to read all of this. So the invisible load that parents carry, um, judgment from schools and society, comparison to other families. Oh, I've spent so much time in that trap. Have you guys? Pressure to fix the problem. Oh, my kids just got to learn how to behave, right? Conflicts with school and social communities, cultural and systemic barriers, and perceived failure as a parent. I can relate to a lot of these, and I'm guessing some of you can relate to these as well. Um, just in case we haven't emphasized enough that this is a difficult experience for us, this is also from that 2023 study. These are quotes from parents. They did interviews with parents of PDA'ers. So things like, I was told I'm enabling him. It's hard when all you feel is judged and blamed and disbelieved. I've been accused of being over anxious and seeing problems that aren't there. I was told your child is too much control. You cater too much to your child. Um, I began to believe the issues are my fault, so I stopped asking for help. It can be humiliating because you have to prove you're good parents. One parent said, parent blame is destabilizing. It makes you a worse parent. The harm it does is long term. So this study where these quotes came from, they were specifically looking at the impact of parental blame and what that does to us as caregivers. If you're feeling these things, you're not alone. Okay. Um, Along with that, trauma, right? The when we heard Christy give her talk about what it felt like, for her as a PDA to experience that emotional dysregulation, there's a lot of trauma associated with PDA. And, you know, when we look at this dysregulation, a lot of people say trauma causes the dysregulation, and that's, I can appreciate that because a meltdown a lot of times can really look like a trauma response from the outside. And there is a lot of trauma in PDA. But trauma's, in addition to being a cause, we really have to appreciate that trauma is a result of the disabilities that cause intense emotional dysregulation. So what do we have for traumatic impacts? The emotional dysregulation or meltdown itself is most traumatizing for the individual experiencing it, right? And Christy, I think, spoke very eloquently to that. It's also traumatizing for the whole family witnessing and supporting through it, right? Violence. Some individuals become violent during some meltdowns. This violence, when our kids are violent, There can be shame associated with that. There can be fear. We hide that. We don't acknowledge that violence. There's a lot of stigma around that. Bullying, right? Our children are often bullied by their peers. And we're bullied. Whole families are bullied by school, community, other parents, judgment, blame, police calls, CPS calls. We've had it all on this list. I'm not the only one on this call who's had it all. Isolation and ostracization. Our child is excluded from schools, friend groups, activities, or the whole family is excluded or shunned from various communities. Gaslighting and blame. We see a lot about how children are being blamed for poor choices, or being manipulative, otherwise just defective, right? And then we're told a lot of times, if our kids mask, we're told we're imagining the problem. And if they don't mask, we're told we're the cause of the problem. There's a lot of trauma there. And I don't say this, to be negative. I say this because we need to make space for it. And we need to acknowledge it so that we can deal with it. Because we need to deal with it if we need to co-regulate and be there for our kids, right? So what do we need as caregivers to help co-regulate with our kids? This is, I don't know, this is a concept. We can change the concept. I made it up. Maybe we can co-create something better. I thought of this as a caregiver's wellness wheel when I'm thinking about the things that help me stay regulated as a caregiver. And there's kind of 3 themes around relationships, practical strategies, and my own internal experience, right? So, as far as relationships go, I think it's really important for us as caregivers to know that our kids and our family has a community to belong to, whether that's our school community, a faith community, um, an activity or shared activity community, but we need to belong somewhere and we need to know we belong somewhere. We also need a peer support network. I have a group, I think at least one of my squad is here. I like to call us a squad, but I've got a group of friends that not all moms of PDA'ers, but moms of kids who have extreme emotional dysregulation disorders, because we get it. And it's really hard when you're the only one in the room who's experiencing something and you don't have another person who understands. So that peer support is really, really important. Practical strategies are important. And I think that comes down to our kids need effective services and they need educated providers. And we need access to education and we need strategies as well. In that self quadrant, I have self-awareness and emotional regulation. That's a really hard one. When you are trying to, if you're working and you've got other kids and you have competing responsibilities and you're the co-regulator, you're the anchor for your kid, we can't be a good co-regulator unless we're regulated. And that self-awareness piece is really, really big. I've started working with somebody on co-regulation strategies for myself. I get outside help for this. I can't do this myself. I mean, and if you can, great. But I tried for a long time and realized I can't do that alone. The other one on that wheel is around wellness and self-care. This is more than just, oh, go away for the weekend and come back and be recharged. We've all tried that and we know it doesn't work, right? Getting a manicure, that doesn't work. Wellness and self-care is more about really carving out time for what fills your cup. Um, and that can be really difficult when you've got a lot of caregiving responsibilities and don't have time. But I think all of these are aspects of well-being that we really need to pay attention to because they build the foundation which we need to be able to support our kids. When one of these is missing, I'm not as good. just not as good at what I do. I'm not as good at co-regulating. My patience is more, I'm more quick to anger, right? And when that happens, I go back and I look at these areas and say, what's missing? Oh, this is an example. I threw this up here really recently. This is an example. I said that I was getting help understanding my own what's my own triggers are so that I don't get as triggered around my kid. This is if you guys know about polyvagal theory, which is a nervous system, and this fits right in with our PDA'ers too, and it fits right in with what Christy was talking about in that video. Down here at the bottom, so for those of you who can't see, it's like a outline of a person, and at the bottom of this ladder, it says, I can't cope. That's the bottom. When you're in the red in the dorsal vagal stage, you're just depleted. And when you're in the orange, that's your sympathetic, where it's like, okay, I need rest, I need recharge. And then in the green is I'm good to go. So like I went through this exercise of what does it feel like for me when I'm in each of these states? And then further, let's take this a little further, is what helps me return to regulation. So I practice a lot of internal awareness and breathing exercises, or knowing if I'm in a sympathetic state and I need a little break, I go ahead and take a break. Even if my kid feels like they really need me at that moment, I know that if I show up and I show up in the wrong space, it's not going to go well. And it's better for me to just take a break. So we have tools that we can seek out. Um, I can put these, I can send these out with the PowerPoint if people want. Just let me know. Um, so, oh, we're totally not going to get through the agenda, but let's get to helpful approaches and strategies. So with all of that said, I don't think we can move into strategies until we acknowledge what we're going through, because we cannot implement these strategies if we're not regulated ourselves. So low arousal approaches are a really good starting point. Partnerships based on trust, flexibility, collaboration, careful use of language, balancing demands are all good strategies. Conventional approaches based on firm boundaries and the use of rewards or consequences of praise. Other approaches often recommended for autism are often ineffective and often counterproductive for a PDA profile. Okay. Most PDA profiles do not like routine, structure, and predictability either. My kid does. I mean, so again, as we go through these strategies, some of these might work for your kids, some might not. Try them and see, right? And this goes back to that exposure therapy question. Will it work? Maybe, maybe it won't. Try it and see. The supports that PDAs require are unique supports, right? And I think we had that cartoon before. A lot of times it just feels like parenting with a map that does not match the terrain, is how a lot of parents characterize it. And we got to figure out what works for our kids, and it's not going to be a checklist where everything's going to work great. So mindset first, okay? So the foundation for us to support our kid, trust. Okay. We have to understand behavior as communication. We have to trust that everyone's doing their best. We have to value connection over compliance, right? Trusted relationships are really essential for PDAers because feeling safe helps them lower anxiety. Feeling understood and respected and safe makes demands easier to manage. Okay. And it helps them feel more in control and less pressured. Let's see, equity. So equity in this context is about balancing power. Balancing power is key when supporting PDAers because relationships based on control or uneven power dynamics create a lot of anxiety for PDAers. So when we balance power, we let go of the idea that we should be able to control or change somebody. We let go of our agenda. We let go of our outcome, our desired outcome, and instead what we're doing is we're listening, we're respecting their autonomy. Remember the other PDA standing for pervasive drive for autonomy, right? We share decisions right? So relationships that are going to be built on that are going to feel safer and happier for not just our PDA, but for us as well. Compassion. So understanding, as Christy Forbes did in her video, that distress behaviors are panic attacks. That's important. When I frame them that way, it helps me be more compassionate to my child. Um, that compassion means you're looking past the behavior and you're focusing on the anxiety and the unsolved problem that's causing it. That shifting mindset also requires a lot of self-compassion. And that's difficult. We talked about the social norms around parenting and authority. We have to unlearn a lot of deeply ingrained, deeply embedded stuff, right? Self-compassion for PDA'ers themselves. If there's anybody here that self-identifies as PDA, they say thinking kindly about yourself can be hard, right? So self-compassion is really, really important. Um, yeah, so we talked about how traditional parenting wisdom doesn't work, right? Traditional parenting wisdom assumes that children respond well to clear rules, consistent consequences, structured routines. It also, it assumes that kids feel safe in their environment, and it assumes that kids are motivated to please, right? But for our kids, no, the world really feels unpredictable and unsafe, despite our best efforts. And even well-intended structures can feel like unbearable demands for some kids. So these conventional strategies, things that emphasize compliance, productivity, self-regulation, that can trigger a lot of intense avoidance, right? And that can make your everyday interactions feel like battles. So what we want to do is we want to shift from control to connection. um, Focusing the nervous system on nervous system regulation, both their nervous system regulation and our nervous system regulation. And that doesn't mean like forcing yourself to stay calm when you're kind of tense. As well as I do, that often backfires. So that polyvagal ladder can be helpful. Um, but just know, like, if mainstream parenting advice isn't working for you, it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because your kid needs something different. And you're the expert. You're the expert on your child. Okay, I think I did all that. Okay, we'll move on. So a way in, some real practical strategies with that kind of foundation set up. The PDA Society UK used to really emphasize this, and they still have it on their website, but it's in a little different format. But it's an acronym, PANDA, right? So here's our little PDA panda with a little heart balloon. It stands for 5 different strategies. So it's a mnemonic device to help you remember. And we're going to go over each of these strategies, okay, in 15 minutes. We'll see. We'll see if we can. The first strategy, the P in the PANDA, is around prioritize and compromise. This used to be called pick your battles, but I think they rephrased it more positively. So what this means is you are stripping things back to essentials. So a lot of families use just like 3 non-negotiables that are safety and might negotiate everything else. There's a book. I don't know. Can you guys, I can't remember if you guys can see me. I love this book. If you have access to this book or look for it online, I think she has a blog. It's called Low Demand Parenting. This is a mom of a PDA'er, and she has a whole book about stripping things back to the essentials. It's awesome. Prioritizing and compromise means talking about the why behind the demands. Like if something needs doing, like share the reason, right? Sometimes you'll find like the reason's kind of dumb and you can take that demand away, but sometimes sharing that reason, it makes sense. And if the PDA understands the reason, it can be easier to get through it. Offering meaningful choices. So meaningful means like real. I mean, not just like do you want the red one or the brown one? As you can, try to offer real and meaningful choices to your kid. And be willing to compromise, which might mean going barefoot today and packing shoes just in case, right? Accepting when things aren't possible. Radical acceptance is a big part of parenting a PDA kid. Oh, yep. Check out Low Demand Parenting, which I already gave the little plug for. It's a great book. If anyone's read it, yeah, let me know if you've read it or what you think of it. The next A in Panda is around anxiety management. I think I just spoke at like the title slide for this section around low arousal. A low arousal approach is just about lowering anxiety. So that's the core for everything else, right? So for PDA'ers, like anxiety is the driver of their demand avoidance, right? And so we want to make their environment as low anxiety as possible. When a request or expectation comes in that puts them into that fight, flight, or freeze, remember that's a panic response and that's not a choice. Anxiety, it can look like I still make mistakes and think my kid's making a choice. I did it yesterday. I did it this afternoon. I'll probably do it tomorrow. But I have to go back and remind myself that my kid's anxiety is often invisible and I have to look for it and I have to remember to see it, right? Um, Often they might laugh or mask or seem relaxed while inside they're feeling trapped or terrified. So we just want to understand and reduce their anxiety. Um, like that's things like having a calm tone, a slow pace, gentle body language, avoiding confrontation or escalation, right? Um, Reducing uncertainty, giving flexible outlines, soft timelines, in the moment adjustments, allowing time to think and process. Processing takes longer for our kids, and it especially takes longer when our kids are dysregulated or anxious. Because remember, their frontal lobe has been taken over by their amygdala. They're not thinking straight. Give them time. Co-regulating is something I talked about. Breathe together. Use a calm voice. Use calm body language. Use humor or distraction. And finally, treat panic like panic. It's not misbehavior. It's overwhelm. So we support through a meltdown using these co-regulation strategies, and we do not discipline them during the meltdown. This isn't the time for lectures or consequences. This is supporting our kids through a panic attack. More on low arousal. Manage the environment, low stimulation. The low arousal approach, by the way, Dr. Andrew McDonald developed this approach. So you can Google Dr. Andrew McDonald if you want to know more about this. And this is evidence, peer-reviewed evidence that this approach minimizes stress and avoids escalations, okay? So traditional behavior strategies are going to rely on rules, reinforcement, consequence, right? The low arousal approach, that asks caregivers to reduce anxiety through changing the environment and changing our own behavior. And they help because they address the real issues behind PDA, which is anxiety and nervous system activation. It's not deliberate defiance, right? All right, so managing the environment, lower the number of demands. This book will help you, low demand parenting. Use supportive communication, calm, neutral, non-confrontational body language and behavior. And it's hard, you guys, when your kids are in that escalated state. I escalate with my kid. So I have to first like get myself down and then I can attend to my child. Okay, I see something in the chat. If I ask my kid, should we do and let him think what he's supposed to do instead of giving him demands? Will this be a low arousal approach? Yeah, that's an example of a low arousal approach. What you've done is you've lowered the demand and let him do what he wants, right? Which in many cases is totally appropriate for a PDA kid if it's not hurting other people. Okay, so the N in Panda is around negotiation and collaboration. So working together is going to build safety. It's going to build fairness. This isn't about, by the way, this is not about negotiating for your hidden agenda. Like I'm going to negotiate to get you to take the garbage out. Okay, it's about finding a shared solution that's going to respect their autonomy while helping everybody meet their needs. So it's not about expecting them to shift. It's not about getting them to comply. It's just you're offering the space for mutual understanding here without pressure, right? So you want to plan together. Like, how do you want to do this? And you have to respect their no. If they can't, they can't, right? And knowing when to push and what, that's something you have to calibrate with your own kid. um, Working side by side and doing tasks together helps. um, Collaborative and proactive solutions, I think I have some slides on that later, so we can talk about that later. The D in Panda is for disguise and manage demands. So we're just kind of, this I've heard this phrase as like softening the edges. We're just softening the edges of the requests, right? So even a really small task can feel like a really big task if it's presented in the wrong way. So we want to reframe things in a more gentle way, and that can help. It doesn't always, work to get them to do it, but it can help their nervous system stay in a less aroused state. Um, this isn't about, this disguise and managing demands isn't about like being really sneaky or manipulating them. It's really about just like creating a space for their autonomy. And we also have to make sure that we're balancing that demand level with their current capacity. Their capacity is going to change on a hourly minute basis, right? And as their capacity changes, we have to respond to that in what we're demanding of them, right? I mean, some days anything extra is too much. Other days you can push a little. Um, a declarative language, if you're not familiar with declarative language, that's where you just kind of make an observation, like your coat's by the door, instead of put on your coat. Or, oh, I wonder if the dryer's done. Um, you can offer information, not instruction. So instead of saying, go out because the bus is going to be here, it's time to start moving for the bus stop, you can say, well, the bus will be here in 10 minutes. You're just giving the information. Humor and using third person. This example is Captain Dinosaur needs her boots. Um, when your kid needs to put their boots on. Different kids, different levels of humor. You fit the kid. Some people have luck with writing things down because notes can feel less intrusive than voices. My kid doesn't work. A lot of kids it works. But again, this is about what's finding what works for your kid. Okay. So, this cartoon this is a cartoon of a guy and there's two suggestion boxes, and the one on the left is unreasonable demands and the one on the right says suggestions. We want to fill the suggestions box, right? We don't want to fill that unreasonable demands box. Okay, so the last strategy in the Panda mnemonic is adaptation. Adaptation means that's about change and flexibility, because we know what works today isn't going to always work tomorrow. That's okay. Um, Flexibility is essential here because a lot of times PDA'ers really need things to be different, creative, playful in order to engage. Once something becomes a routine, it can become a demand in itself. Like, I forget that. But a routine, remember when we talked about demands at the very beginning, types of demands? Like a routine can be an indirect demand, right? So we want to be able to adapt in the moment. We want to be able to rethink the plan entirely. Having a plan B and a plan C, a backup plan and a backup plan, that's not failure, that's flexibility. Okay. You can try novelty role play or humor. Like you can, to get my, not my PDA, but to get my older kid home from the pool when he was little, we used to pretend that a witch was chasing us. It was just like this fun game used to play, or the kid never would have made it home. So use pretend to be secret agents, race the clock, make things silly. Um, Also, really be paying attention to signs of burnout from your kid and know when to pull back. Like that's about that. Like always be assessing their capacity and your own capacity as well. Adapting the environment to make things easier and more low demand. avoid stacking demands on demands, and equalizing the give and take. So equalizing, people talk in PDA about equalizing behavior a lot as something PDA'ers do, which is they're trying to like up the power imbalance. But also you want to equalize too. When a PDA'er does something that's hard for them, you can soften some demands later. Don't frame it as a reward, right? Because it's not about a reward. It's more about fairness, right? It's not about behavior control. It's about you worked really hard. You kind of deserve a little leeway now. You're going to balance things out. Wow. Okay. That was fast. Um, Panda. I like Panda because it's easy to remember. It's Panda. Um, and it's a framework that is organized and makes sense for my organized brain, but it's helpful for me. Things that don't work, consequences, threats do not work. Punishments, oh, spectacularly do not work. Um, Lecturing does not work. Less is more. Reminding them of the rules does not work. Convincing them, like debating with them, does not work, right? And things not to do, like a lot of parents, myself included, worry a lot about accountability. Like if I take away these demands, are they just going to think like they're being rewarded for not um, for refusing, and they're never going to learn to be accountable? You need to let that go. Our kids have disabilities. We're accommodating their disability. Don't express disappointment or shame, right? Don't get stuck on worry that you're letting them get away with stuff. And what else is on here? Don't dismiss their reality. It's hard. It's really hard for them. Um, okay, so it is almost 7:30. I was going to spend a little bit of time talking about collaborative and proactive solutions, um, which is an excellent model to use with kids who have a PDA profile. Um, I don't have time to talk about it, but we put in the notes a link to the Lives in the Balance website, which has information on it. And I also put in a link to a recorded training. Like, go watch the training. The training, you have to register. It's free. It's on OSPI's website. You have to register and give them your email, but it's absolutely free, and it's a couple hours long, and it's delivered directly by Dr. Ross Green, and it's amazing. So I encourage you to check that out. Let's see what else. Let's run through these. I'm not going to go through these slides, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so big ideas. Okay, so we've learned a lot. Like we learned that if we're going to be effective co-regulars, we need to be in a place to regulate ourselves, right? And we learned about the panda approach. Um, we know now if what you're doing is not working, try something else. And remember that you're the expert. You're the expert on your child and your family. I didn't get to talk about education and advocacy either. Um, if anybody wants more, email Gita or special ed services because we can do more of this. We can continue this conversation. And I think continuing the conversation is helpful because we cannot do this alone. We really can't. And everybody that's here, thank you for coming. Yeah. Angela, were there any questions or things before we wrap up?
There's just comments about how amazing you are and that they would like a part two. Um, can they have your contact information?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Somebody shared books about fiction books written by a British tween who has autism and PDA.
Oh, awesome.
And her tween read them and loved them and said the character was just like them. Reading them myself gave me huge insight into some of the things my tween goes through in life and at school, and then listed all the books.
Oh, cool. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Um, if I was forwarded this link by a friend because I have a PDA kid, but we aren't in the district, is there a place I can still get access to these resources and links that you're mentioning, sending out? Thank you.
So I just put in the chat this email address, specialedservices@bsd405.org. Send all of your stuff there and they will forward it to me. The reason I'm not giving you my personal email is because or my district email is because I'm gonna miss it. I get way too many emails. But if you send it to them, they will make sure I get all of this. And the
Yeah.
free training link to the free
I put
training
it
at
back in the
CPS. Okay, awesome.
I put it back in the
Yeah.
chat. Yes, a part two. Thank you so much. Yes, I want a part two. This is great. Can you share the online course of Dr. Green?
Yeah.
What is it called? I put those links in the chat again. Thank you so much. Yes, I want a part two. Thank you so much for the presentation. Interested in another session. I'd be interested about strategies that would help at school. Thank you so much, Michelle. Very informative. Looking forward to a second session. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm thinking another session, it would be really cool to potentially be in person and we can kind of share our school advocacy strategies. Because I've got some, but I know like there is a
Mhm.
wealth of wisdom on this call and we need to really share from each other. So um yeah, you all did a great thing just by showing up. You're doing a great thing for your kids. So thank you. Okay. So you have that. I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to end the call right away because I want to give people time to copy and paste that stuff from the chat. But I'll end the call soon. So you guys go ahead and get off, but I'll stick around for another 5 minutes or so. And if anyone has a question or something, I can see the chat now. So thanks. Thanks for being here. Angela, you're fine if you want to go have dinner. Go for
It's
it.
fine.
Okay.
This was really good, Michelle, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I was like, lots of thank yous. Look how you're so good.
Well, the thing about PDA is it's really isolating. And
Mhm.
I think it's it can feel so validating to be in a group of people to be like, oh yeah, these are my people. These people get it. That can that's very powerful.
I feel like I have answers. Thank you.
Oh, this is a good question. Is it
Yeah,
okay to talk about the child's accountability if it relates to safety concerns, such as throwing objects at teachers? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Um, and I think like in that question, I'm it's the word accountability that's standing out for me. And what do we mean by that, right? Um, my kid has explosive behaviors and is extremely can become quite violent and hurt people. And for us, that means looking for preventative strategies to avoid the throwing objects at teachers. Um, Accountability doesn't mean you. Okay, so for my kid, it might be punching a hole in the door. My kid likes to punch stuff, right? So I can't speak to your child and your situation. I can only really speak to mine. So if my child punches a hole in the door, there are going to be some consequences to that, right? Uh, One of them is we need to fix the door, right? And so because we have a lot of holes in a lot of doors, we have a whole hole patching kit. And when our kid is regulated, we, and by the way, they have a lot of shame around that behavior. And I'm guessing your child has a lot of shame around that behavior too. So the first thing is we're really careful um, to try to ameliorate that shame, right? By talking about what an autistic meltdown might look like and feel like, by reassuring that they're still a good person, and we still love them. And then we talk about, hey, and now we've got this hole in the door. What are we going to do about that? Would you be willing to help fix that? You know? And they're willing to help fix that. CPS is another model that you might find helpful for your child, right? So if your child is throwing objects at teachers, the CPS model would kind of go further upstream here to say, what is the expectation or demand? It's not going to be about the throwing the object, but what's the expectation or demand that the child's having difficulty meeting, right? Um, and then let's talk about that expectation or demand with the kid. So I'm thinking about accountability not in the traditional way. I'm thinking about accountability in what is the adult's accountability to help the child prevent getting so dysregulated that they lose it and throw stuff. And how do we help the child understand and make amends for the impact of their action without feeling shamed? I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, and if you want, yeah, if it doesn't, let's do another session. It's May. If we do another session, it might be September, but let's talk more the next time. And I really encourage you to check out that link that to CPS. What skills can or should we teach our kids with PDA in order to learn how to cope with their unique needs? Oh, I want to crowdsource this one because I struggle with this. I think education around what PDA feels like can feel really helpful. One time when my kid had a super epic meltdown, I think it was we had the police called to our home. It was like really big. Um, I found a video, like I watched so many YouTube videos, but I found one that I thought they would connect with, where somebody with, you know what? I'm going to turn off the recording
Yeah,
if I
I was
can.
just going to
I
tell you.
forgot that part. Thank you. Okay. The recording